Hi everyone, happy Tuesday. I hope you're all doing well and thank you so much for joining me for another soap making video. Today we are ending our autumnal theme and we're ending it with a very autumnal soap. I am making my leaf pile soap and I had this idea that I wanted to try for a couple of years, so I'm so excited to be making it today. I'm starting out this soap the same way as I always do, with my lye water at about 100 degrees and my oils right around 95 degrees. I'm slowly adding my lye water solution into my oils and mixing it as I go so that my soap combines nice and evenly, and as ever I am just mixing that with my spatula to get those lye water solution and oils nicely emulsified together but staying nice and thin so that I can create the design that I am looking for in this soap. Now that I'm happy that those are all emulsified together, we are going to go ahead and split this soap batter into 4 equal-ish parts. As ever, I'm not too worried about the weight of each part. I am going to go ahead and eyeball it and make sure they are fairly even just by eyeballing it using my best judgment. Once I've got those as even as I can, I'm going to go ahead and start adding my colorants. So I'm starting off with one that I don't usually use. I'm using YELLOWDOCK, and contrary to what the name and color would suggest, this is going to give me a nice deep burgundy color in my soap. Then I'm adding some SPIRALINA to my top layer, and that's going to give me a nice foresty green color. The next color that I will be using is TURMERIC, and that's going to give me a deep orange kind of a color once it's all mixed into the soap. I'm just adding a couple of teaspoons of that, and adding more of this colorant is going to deepen the color in my soap. The last colorant that I'm using is PAPRICA, and once this soap goes through gel, that's going to give me a nice true red color in this soap. So this soap is going to be a layered soap. I'm going to start working with my YELLOWDOCK layer, and you can see as I'm mixing it with my spatula and the soap is reacting with that colorant, it is giving me a really nice deep burgundy color. I love burgundy and I love the way that this colorant turned out in this soap. It is just beautiful. Now, because this is going to be a layered soap, I'm going to go ahead and use my stick blender and bring this to a fairly thick trace. I want this to set up fairly quickly and be able to support the next layer. Once I have the trace I'm looking for, I'm going to go ahead and add my essential oil blend, which is a beautiful blend of wintergreen, spruce and eucalyptus essential oils. It smells so fresh and crisp and clean. The wintergreen really is a nice, sweet, beautiful scent which is grounded nicely with the spruce and reminds me of a nice walk on an autumnal day. Once I've got all that mixed in, I'm going to add that into my 2 molds and tap those down on my counter to get this first layer nice and even. I am scraping the soap out of my bowl. I won't be returning to it at all, so I'm going to make sure that every little bit of soap is in my molds where I need it to be. Now, autumn is one of my favorite seasons. I just love being out in the woods in the nice, cool, crisp air, crunching through the leaves that have fallen, sitting in the woods, contemplating. So I was so excited to make this leaf pile soap. Now I want my layers to be textured, so I'm going to use the back of my spoon and create these little divots in this soap and create a nice fun design between the layers. Next we are going to be working with the paprika layer, so that's going to give me a nice red color. I am mixing that in again with my spatula to make sure that I'm happy with the depth of color that I have in this soap. Then I'm going to go ahead and add my essential oils to this layer and use my stick blender to bring it to a nice thick trace. So I have my essential oils there in my bowl, and I'm just using the same stick blender I used before. So leave me a comment in the comment section below. Are you a fall kind of person? Do you love the fall as much as I do? Or do you prefer the summer or winter? What's your favorite season Or do you live in a country where you don't get any seasons? Alright, I'm going to leave this so it's still pourable. I want to be able to get it in my molds and make sure that all of my little divots that I've created are filled in. Once I'm happy with the consistency, I've brought my molds back and I'm using the spatula to break the fall of this soap to make sure I don't get any drops into my soap, and I'm just pouring it right over the previous layer. As you can see, this is a little bit thinner than the previous layer, so once I have everything in the mold, I'm going to go ahead and set my molds to one side and start working with the next layer. This layer is the turmeric layer, so once again I'm going to go ahead and mix that in with my spatula, and you can see that as that turmeric is dispersing in my soap, the color is becoming nice and deep. And at this point it actually is deeper than the red of the paprika layer, but as this soap goes through gel and saponifies, that is going to balance out the other way. So I'm going to use my stick blender and bring this to a nice thick trace, and then return to my molds and use the back of my spoon to create the texture in the previous paprika layer that I made before pouring my orange layer right on top. Once I've got all those little divots made, I'm going to go ahead and pour in my turmeric layer right on top, and again I'm using my spatula to break the fall of this soap and to push it to either side of my mold, making sure I get as even a coverage as I possibly can. Once again I'm going to go ahead and scrape out this bowl once I finish pouring the soap into the mold to get it as clean as possible and limit the amount of washing up that I have to do at the end of this soap making session. Now that my soap mold is getting nice and full, I am evening that layer out before leaving it to set up a little bit more and mixing in my spirulina into my last layer. So we're going to go ahead and mix that with my spatula for the final time before adding the essential oils and using my stick blender to bring it to a nice thick trace. Alright, so this is the perfect consistency for me. It's still nice and pourable, but you can see the lines right on top forming a reasonable trace. I'm going to go ahead and use my spoon as I have previously and create the texture in the previous layer before I pour on my spirulina layer. As with my previous layers, I am going to use my spatula to break the fall of this soap so that it doesn't create any of those drop swirls in this soap, and it gives me nice defined layers. Now I designed the layers of this soap to look like a beautiful pile of leaves that have been raked throughout the season, so I'm starting with my deepest autumnal colours and varying that through to my fresher green leafy layer right on top. Then we're going to finish this soap off with some nice defined leaves on top, and after I cut this soap I will show you all how I made those using some soap dough and some silicone molds. Alright, I have scraped out my last layer and I'm going to go ahead and get my soap evenly distributed across the molds and tap those down on my work surface to get those bars as even as they can possibly be. Now this layer I'm not going to put any of those little textures on top with my spoon, but I am going to use a gear tie to create some swirls in the top of this bar. That's just going to give some interest on the top of this soap so that I can go ahead and place my leaves right on top. So anything that does show through will give some interest. Alright, I have pulled my soap out of the mold and I'm taking it out of its little silicone liner. You can see how beautifully my soap unmolds, and that's because of the hard oils in my recipe. So I've lined this up with my multi-bar cutter to give me the 2 little sample pieces on the ends of the loaves. And I'm going to go ahead and cut that all the way through. And let's take a look at the inside. You can really see the definition between that YELLOWDOCK layer and the SPIRALINA layer. The definition between the turmeric and the paprika still isn't huge, but I love the subtlety of it, and I love the different colors in the layers and the gradients that I've managed to achieve in this soap. This is just such a beautiful soap, and as this soap cures, those colors are going to change just slightly, and the burgundy layer is going to become more red than brown. Alright, it is time to make the leaves to go on the top of this soap, and they're going to look a little bit like the soap in the front of the screen. I'm working with some soap dough that I have kneaded so it's nice and soft. It's kind of like a Play-Doh consistency, and I'm just pushing that into my silicone impression mold and making sure that I fill these leaves completely, pushing it down firmly to get the definition of those leaves. Once I've got that in, I am using my fingers to make sure I don't have too many lumps on the back of my leaves. I am just using the 2 leaves that you can see that I have filled in that left-hand mold, just because those are the only ones that are the right size to fit on the top of my bars. Each bar is going to have 5 different color leaves, and those are going to go in the gradient that you can see on the soap right in front. Once I have all of that soap packed into the impression mold, I am going to flatten out the back of those with a little knife and cut off any excess before peeling those leaves up and away from the mold. So you can see they are picking up all of the impression from my mold, all of the definitions, and they look beautiful. Unfortunately, I have lost the footage of my placing those on top of the soaps. All I did was pipe a little bit of soap right on top of the cured soap and place the leaves right on top. So you can see some final cured pictures how pinkish that burgundy layer has come up, and the definition between the layers with all of those cute leaves right on top. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I'll see you next Tuesday.